Welcome back to Viral Shakespeare. It's Dr. Rusty Jones, and we are finishing off King Lear today, talking about Act 5. I need to clue you in on a little something that may just come as a gigantic surprise. I am a big nerd. I know, the man who studied Shakespeare most of his life, who can sing the entire score of The Pirates of Penzance. A nerd? Unbelievable, but it's true. So I'm going to start off with a little bit of Star Wars for you. And yes, Shakespeare and Star Wars have something in common. There have even been editions of A New Hope in Shakespeare's language put out, and I have several of those copies. But I want to start with The Last Jedi, the film that came just before the most recent Star Wars film. Director Rian Johnson has gone on record as saying that the way that he wanted to make his film unique and to some degree make a name for himself as a filmmaker was to do the following. Very popular these days in modern film, TV, the way for an artist to make a name for him or herself. Subvert the audience's expectations. They think they know what they're getting into when they go into watching a film or watching a TV show or reading a book or whatever it is, and they encounter something completely different. Rian Johnson did this with The Last Jedi. He knew that if he made it exactly like The Empire Strikes Back, everyone was going to yell and scream and say, "Oh my God, you made it exactly like The Empire Strikes Back," the way they yelled and screamed about the fact that The Force Awakens was exactly like A New Hope. So he said, fine, I'm going to subvert all the expectations for this second film in the trilogy. And then everybody yelled and screamed saying, "Oh my God, you didn't follow the formula of Star Wars, and so you just can't make everybody happy." But he did know that one of the things that you needed to do if you were going to basically make a name for yourself, show yourself as an important artist and thinker, is to do something different, is to let the audience think they know the direction that you're going and then take them in another way, surprise them, make them think about what they're seeing as opposed to just sort of going through the motions and thinking, well, I already know how this is going to end, so I'm just going to sit back basically and enjoy the ride. I've already mentioned to you that when Shakespeare's audience came in to see King Lear, if they didn't already in some way know that it was a tragedy, if it wasn't announced to them in some way that it was going to be a tragedy, then they went in with a certain expectation. This piece is going to be essentially a kind of medieval romance. And I'm going to talk about the dictates and the terms and the structure of romance when we get to The Tempest at the next lecture. But for this one, let's just say, in a romance, you expect everything to work out well. You expect our lovers to be back together again. You expect the evil people to fall, often by their own hands, but sometimes because of the power and the goodness of the protagonist in the romance, whatever it is. And you expect justice to be served and everything to work out neatly and nicely to your satisfaction at the end. One of my favorite examples of a book and a film that play around with this is The Princess Bride. When the young boy who's being read the tale by his grandfather starts to think that his expectations are being subverted in some way, that the good guy is going to lose. He's not going to marry the princess. The bad guy is, in fact, going to win. He throws up his hands and says, "Geez, Grandpa, what did you read me this thing for?" And he's outraged. Often we don't like our expectations to be subverted. Maybe we don't like to think about the fact that we don't necessarily live in a universe that is absolutely fair. The good guys win, the bad guys fall, and everything is just and perfect. So if you went into King Lear with the older tale in your mind, you knew that, or you expected, I should say, that Lear and Cordelia, although they are downtrodden and terrible things that happened to them and Gloucester and everybody else, that things were going to work out in the end and divine justice was going to be served on everybody who deserved it and everything was going to be restored to the way it was. And it looks like in Act 5, that is exactly where we are going, until we absolutely aren't. So let me check some of my notes here. We've come out of Act 4, where it looks like Lear has had his, in Aristotelian terms, his anagnorisis. He's certainly gone through his peripeteia, his change in fortune. He's been a king, and then he gives that away, and then he's basically a beggar, and then he's a madman, and then he's just a fond and foolish old man. That, to me, seems to be his anagnorisis. When he says to Cordelia, "You have cause to hate me, your sisters don't," we can certainly argue with whether or not the sisters do, in fact, have cause to hate him or not. But he admits that he has done Cordelia wrong, and he admits that he is a very fond and foolish, fond meaning stupid, stupid and, misguided old man, and his daughter has forgiven him. No cause, she says. I have no cause to hate you, and I won't hate you, she says. That appears to be an anagnorisis, and we certainly feel pity for Lear and for Cordelia for the rest of the play. But again, if you didn't know that the tragic trajectory is the one that we were following, you might think we were following the old romance trajectory and everything's going to work out fine. And again, that looks like where we are headed. So I wanted to start off with this at the beginning of Act 5. Act 5, Scene 1, right off the bat, about line 8 or so. Our villains seem at this point to be firmly established, and we can quibble with the nature and the source of their villainy, but at this point they're pretty villainous people. Edmund is playing the daughters off of each other. He's ingratiated himself with Cornwall, who's now dead. He's trying to ingratiate himself with Albany. He's playing the sisters, as I've said, romantically against each other, which is what we're going to find out. And the two daughters have basically treated their father incredibly badly. Now they're going to treat each other incredibly badly. So we hear from Regan, and remember, Regan is the wife of Cornwall, who was stabbed by the servant and died of his wounds. Regan says to Edmund, the bastard, line 8, tell me but truly, but then speak the truth. Do you not love my sister? Goneril, who's still married to Albany, who's still alive. In honored love, says Edmund, but have you never found my brother's way to the forfended place, if you know what I mean? Edmund says, no, by mine honor, madam, which is deeply ironic because he doesn't really have any honor. I never shall endure her. Dear my lord, be not familiar with her. Well, we as audience members with our dramatic irony, we already know that he is familiar with her and familiar with Regan, and he's getting the two to hate each other, and as we're going to find out, much, much worse, to his own advantage, through his own machinations. Fear me not, says Edmund. Well, perhaps she should. Edgar comes in around line 29 or 30 in disguise and tells the good Duke of Albany, before you fight the battle, line 30, open this letter. If you have victory, let the trumpet sound for him that brought it. Wretched though I seem, I can produce a champion that will prove what is avouched there. If you miscarry, your business of the world hath so an end, and machination ceases. Fortune love you. The letter basically denounces Edmund as a traitor. It denounces Goneril. It denounces Regan. And the champion that will show up when the trumpets blast is, of course, Edgar himself. This is falling back on a very old medieval tradition of battle or a contest, basically, where God will defend the one who has morality on their side. It's a very old part of chivalry and chivalric medieval tradition. And Edgar's relying on this because he's the right one, because Edmund's the wrong one. God will protect him, and God will not protect Edmund. So he will call him out, he will denounce him publicly, they will have a fight, and right will win out in the end. And in a way, he's right. That does, in fact, happen. And we as audience members are going to look at this and go, okay, good. So this is what's going to happen. Edmund's going to be beaten by Edgar. Good. And right will prevail. Well, kind of. Jumping forward, skipping to Act 5, Scene 2, about line 5 or so. Alarm and retreat. Enter Edgar. Away, old man, give me thy hand away. King Lear hath lost. He and his daughter taken. They've been captured. Give me thy hand, come on. And Gloucester says, no further, sir. A man may rot even here. And Edgar says, what, in ill thoughts again? I thought I cured you of this despair. What are you doing? Are you falling back into despair? Men must endure. And endurance, patience, this is part of Gloucester's anagnorisis that I talked about last time. Men must endure their going hence, even as they're coming hither. You have to endure leaving this life in the same way that you endure coming into it. Life is, in this kind of formula, not particularly pleasant. Ripeness is all. Come on. And that's true, too, says Gloucester, and off they go. Act 5, Scene 3. We hear, of course, as I just said, that the king and Cordelia have been captured by the forces of Goneril, Regan, Edmund, etc. And we think to ourselves as an audience with our expectations, okay, that's fine. They've been captured, but it's all going to work out okay because I already know this story. Well, maybe you do and maybe you don't. Act 5, Scene 3. This scene always gets me. This is a tough one. Talk about catharsis. Talk about pity that an audience member feels towards someone who's making a mistake or someone who's enduring something terrible, and the fear that you yourself may replicate these mistakes. I mean, this is the scene of catharsis, or one of them anyway, in Act 5 that always gets me the most. Lear and Cordelia are being hauled off to prison. Cordelia at line 4 says, "We are not the first who, with best meaning, have incurred the worst." We're not the first people to suffer. "For thee, oppressed king, I am cast down. Myself could else outfrown false fortune's frown. Shall we not see these daughters and these sisters? Shall we not confront the evil of Goneril and Regan?" And you would think Lear would say, "Absolutely, let's confront them. Let's throw them down. Let's tell them the evil people that they are." But that's not where his mind is. Line 8. No, 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 no. "Come, let's away to prison. We two alone will sing, like birds in the cage. When thou dost ask me blessing, I'll kneel down and ask of thee forgiveness. So we'll live, and pray, and sing, and tell old tales, and laugh at gilded butterflies, and hear poor rogues talk of court news. And we'll talk with them too, who loses and who wins, who's in and who's out, and take upon us the mystery of things as if we were God's spies. And we'll wear out in a walled prison packs and sects of great ones that ebb and flow by the moon." Gets me every time. He says, "No, I want to go to prison with you. We'll sit there and we'll gossip and we'll laugh at gilded butterflies and we'll talk about who's in at court and who's out at court and we'll act like God's spies and we'll have such a great time together." He's finally got Cordelia. He's finally got the kind of relationship he should have had at the beginning as a good father with his daughter who loves him for all of the right reasons, not the ones he's been asking for. And he wants to have that father-daughter relationship. "I want to be in the cage with you so that we, like a father with a child, can laugh at butterflies and gossip and just have a good time." And the thing that's so heartbreaking about this is it's not going to happen. It's too late. He's come way too late to the realization that this is the kind of relationship he should have had with a child all along and not asked so much of them and not put the kind of pressures on them that he has. But he realizes it now. But if you know the tale and you know the direction it's going in a negative way, as opposed to the audience expectations that this is all going to work out well, it's absolutely heartbreaking. If you think it's going to work out well, there's a certain joy behind it. So it all depends a little bit on your expectations, your knowledge of the genre, the knowledge of the direction that we are in fact going. Edmund says, "Take them away. Upon such sacrifices, my Cordelia," says Lear, "the gods themselves throw incense. Have I caught thee?" I love that. It's just a moment where he breaks away and says, "I've got you, haven't I? We're together." Oh, and your heart just breaks in two. "He that parts us shall bring a brand from heaven, a torch from heaven, and fire us hence like foxes. Wipe thine eyes. Stop crying. The good years shall devour them flesh and fell ere they shall make us weep. We'll see 'em starved first. Come." And there is that little edge toward the romantic defiance that Lear's going to talk about a little bit lately when he says that he killed the slave that was hanging Cordelia. So again, with our expectations, we may think that this is going to be the moment where Lear's able to overcome his age and infirmity and all the rest, and good will prevail. Jumping forward a little bit, Act 5, Scene 3, line 68, we hear Regan say, "Lady, I am not well, else I should answer from a full-flowing stomach," as she and Goneril are going back and forth in this scene. We're going to find out later that Goneril, in fact, Goneril has in fact been poisoning Regan. Line 89, Act 5, Scene 3, "Sick, oh sick," cries out Regan, and Goneril turns to the audience and says, "If not, I'll ne'er trust medicine." Meaning, well, if you weren't sick, I'd never trust the poison that I've been putting in your food for a while. They are clearly monsters at this point, and Goneril has destroyed Regan out of jealousy for Edmund, amongst other things, but basically the kind of dissension that their father put in place from minute one. Let's see. The war is lost for Lear and for Cordelia, yet the herald comes in and makes the announcement that will draw Edgar and hopefully fix everything. He's going to be the knight coming to slay the dragon Edmund, theoretically. The herald says on Act 5, Scene 3, about line 102, if any man of quality or degree within the lists of the army will maintain upon Edmund, supposed Earl of Gloucester, that he is a manifold traitor, let him appear by the third sound of the trumpet. He is bold in his defense. 3 trumpets sound, and of course Edgar shows up again in disguise to take on his half-brother. Edgar denounces him in a very formal way at about line 120, cites his oath, his profession, and despite, he says, your strength, your place, your youth, your eminence, thy valor and thy heart, thou art a traitor. False to thy gods, thy brother, and thy father, conspirate against this high illustrious prince, and from the extremest upward of thy head to the descent and dust below thy foot, a most toad-spotted traitor. There is no way to answer such challenge except combat, and that is exactly what Edmund does, but not before he gives a little nod to the fact that Edgar seems to have that same thing in his appearance that Kent sees in Lear early in the play: authority, divine given grace, that just can't be, it's marked out by God. It has nothing to do really with your actions. Edmund says, in wisdom I should ask thy name, line 134, but since thy outside looks so fair and warlike, and that thy tongue, some say, of breeding breathes, what safe and nicely I might well delay by rule of knighthood, I disdain and spurn. Back do I toss these treasons to thy head. And they have to fight, and they do, and Edgar wounds Edmund to the point where Edmund is going to die of those wounds over the course of this scene. Goneril is denounced. She rushes off. Edgar gives us a long breakdown of what happened to their mutual father, line 184 or so, Act 5, Scene 3, mentioning to his wounded brother Edmund that Edgar saved Gloucester in all senses. Saved him from despair, led him, begged for him, saved him from despair, never, O fault, revealed myself unto him until some half hour passed, when I was armed. Not sure, though hoping of this good success, I asked his blessing, and from first to last told him our pilgrimage. So the whole tale has been revealed to Gloucester. But his flawed heart, alack, too weak the conflict to support, twixt or between two extremes of passion, joy, joy and grief, burst smilingly, which I've mentioned to you before. The gentleman rushes in, informs us that, holding a bloody knife, by the way, and informs us that Goneril has in fact stabbed herself. Regan has died of the poison. The gentleman says at line 203, your lady, sir, your lady, and her sister by her is poisoned. She confesses it. Edmund, I was contracted to them both. All 3 now marry in an instant, because all 3 of them are either dead or headed that direction. The sisters are brought in and brought down, and Edmund is allowed to look on the machinations that he has done. And at the end, not the end, but about line 220, Edmund says he pants for life. Some good I mean to do, despite of mine own nature. I mean to do something good before I die. Quickly send, be brief in it, to the castle, for my writ is on the life of Lear and on Cordelia. Nay, send in time. And Albany says, run, run, oh, run. It now looks like the romance is going to be fulfilled. We're going to save them in time. The 2 evil daughters are dead. Edmund is laying there dying. If we save Cordelia and Lear in time, then the old expectations of the romance will be fulfilled. England will be safe. The universe will be good. Justice will be served, etc. It must have been quite a surprise to those who weren't ready for it when, in Act 5, Scene 3, at line 232, Lear enters and says, howl, howl, howl. He is not, in fact, howling. He is telling everybody present in that scene, and the audience as well, you should be howling. He is carrying his dead child in his arms, probably with a rope around her neck, maybe, just to make the point to the audience. But he's telling them, if you can look at this scene and not howl, you are men of stone, as he says. How could you do that? I mentioned to you that in some readings, the very beginning of the play is a kind of parody of the marriage ceremony. Well, if that's the case, then this is a parody of a funeral ceremony. An old man carrying the young. That is the opposite. That is a parody of what should be happening. The young should be carrying the old out of this life, not the old carrying the young. When Kent says at line 239 or so, is this the promised end or image of that horror, says Edgar. Is this what Judgment Day is going to look like? Or is it the image of Judgment Day, says Edgar? Because this looks like the end of the world. It is a reversal. It is unnatural. The old should not be carrying in the young, and a father by no means should be carrying in their dead child. You are men of stones. Had I your tongues and eyes, I'd use them so that heaven's vault should crack. She's gone forever. I know when one is dead and when one lives. She's dead as earth. Lend me a looking glass, lend me a mirror. If that her breath will mist or stain the stone, why then she lives. He's looking for a modicum of hope in this situation, although I think deeply he knows that there isn't any. Lear says at line 242 or so, this feather stirs. I don't know where he got a feather, but he's imagining anyway that Cordelia is breathing and the feather that presumably he has is moving. She lives. If it be so, if she lives, it is a chance which does redeem all sorrows that ever I have felt. And of course, she isn't alive, and therefore all the sorrows that he have felt are not redeemed. This is not a just universe that we're going to end in. Let's see it. Line 250, Lear says that he killed the slave that was hanging Cordelia. And the gentleman says, 'tis true, my lords, he did. He's got that much vitality and honor, if you will, left in him that he killed the one who was hanging Cordelia. But again, too late. If it was a romance, it would be right on time. But not this. Too late. Lear does not really recognize Kent. He's still looking for Caius. Kent says, that was me. And Lear says, well, we'll see about that. I'm not so sure. Edmund is reported dead at line 271. And let's see. Lear picks up again something very important, I think, at line 282. Lear says, and my poor fool is hanged. And again, some people think that this is a reference to the fact that the fool vanished back in Act 3, but others think that this is a reference to Cordelia herself and that the word fool is a kind of a sweet little nickname that he has for her. I don't really know which is the right answer, but the idea of merging the ideas of the fool and Cordelia as both these sort of good moral guides for Lear, and now they're both gone, just increases the level of despair. No life. Why should a dog, a horse, a rat have life, and thou no breath at all? Because the universe isn't fair. Thou'lt come no more. Never. 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 He says never 5 times. I mentioned the theme of nothing to you early on. These things are wedded together, the idea of nothingness and the idea of never. Shakespeare never repeats anything unless he really wants you to pay attention to it. He can think of other words. But in this case, never is the word that he repeats 5 times. And I wanted to take just a second to talk about the word never as a thematic word. The word never, here you go, is a blended version of not ever, which, okay, makes sense. But then what does the word ever mean? Ever is from the Old English afre, which means eternal or always. What he is despairing here is the fact that she's gone, and he is trying to wrap his mind around the idea that she is no longer present and will never be present. She is not always now. She is never. She is erased. It is almost a sort of nihilistic despair that he feels. He will never be reunited to her. He will never have the kind of relationship that he found he actually wanted. Not the kind nursery that he had before, but the good relationship like birds in a cage that I talked about before. Pray you undo this button. There's that odd moment again of him saying, oh, I've got a button. Somebody undo this button. Before, it was a sign of his coming madness and shedding his clothes. Now it's his soul, I think, trying to leave. Thank you, sir. Do you see this? Look on her. Look. Her lips. Look there. Look there. And he dies. This is often played with the actor sort of looking up and seeing the spirit of Cordelia as Lear's own spirit goes, and they meet each other, and it has a kind of darkly romantic angle to it. But if you look back at the quarto, for my students on page 137, Act 5, Scene 3, about line 304, and my poor fool is hanged. No, no life. There is one fewer no there. Again, such negativity in the folio. No, no life. Why should a dog, a horse, a rat have life, and thou no breath at all? O thou wilt come no more. Never, never, never. 3 nevers as opposed to 5. Much bleaker in the folio. Pray you undo this button. That's the same. Thank you, sir. But then no imagining of the ghost of Cordelia flying away and Lear's own soul going off to meet it. Only 4 O's. Usually indicating for Shakespeare that this is someone's death throes. He faints, says Edgar in the quarto, my lord, and Lear himself says, break heart, I prithee break. He demands that he himself die. He commands it. It is his last act as a former king to do it. He commands himself to die. Doesn't happen that way in the folio. Edgar says he faints, my lord, and it is Kent, the good servant, who implores the heavens, break heart, I prithee break. Please break his heart. Please end his suffering. Look up, my lord, and Kent says, vex not his ghost, or let him pass. He hates him that would, upon the rack of this tough world, stretch him out longer. And Edgar says, he is gone indeed. And he is. He simply fades from this universe as opposed to commanding himself to go. Which one do you like better? I don't know. I prefer kind of the quarto where Lear is able to give one last command, and it's to himself to pass. In this one, his despair just overtakes him, and he fades out. Talk about a subverting of audience expectations. They'd be sitting there screaming, wait a minute, he's supposed to win! Geez, Grandpa, what'd you read me this thing for? No, he's gone. This is not the same universe. This is not the same universe as the original tale. We end, at least in the folio, with Edgar giving the final speech. It's Albany in the quarto. Albany's an older man. He's defeated. It's a very bleak moving forward for England. In Edgar, he's young, and he has triumphed over the evil Edmund when we thought we were in a romance and everything was going to work out great. And it is Edgar, the young person, who gives us maybe just a glimmer of hope for England in his final speech. Line 300, the weight of this sad time we must obey. Speak what we feel, not what we ought to say. The oldest hath borne most. We that are young shall never see so much, nor live so long. And that's where we end. That is King Lear. That is Act 5. My next video will be focused on the question of romance and miracles and forgiveness and the Tempest, which, at least in Shakespeare's mind anyway, is a comedy. So things will look up, I promise you. And until we get to that point, stay safe, and I'll talk to you soon.